we do a lot of remote work. So the fact that I'm physically in a vehicle going to a site, as you can tell, I'm actually in a vehicle. I looked up, I'm like, gosh, I still have CDs in the car. So that tells you how often I'm in a vehicle, right?
So you didn't do that just for us, huh?
Yes, this is now, we are literally taking the show on the road.
I'll see you in Spain, lads.
Source code ownership has been a contentious point between integrators and clients historically, with both having valid points as to their perspective on it. We break down this debate and resolve a lot of the issues next on A State of Control. A State of Control, episode 130, version 2, really, really final. Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control, programming, and automation aspects of the audiovisual industry. My name is Steve Greenblatt. I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to have an interesting conversation that revolves around source code. And I know that that's always something that sparks some interest and can be highly debated and is something that has really been part of the programming world for all the years that I've been in the industry, and that's quite a number. So we'll speak with a couple of industry veterans about that, and we'll see where things stand these days. Before we do that, I'd like to say hello to my partner here at A State of Control. He's in the mobile unit. He is also somebody, I also got to see him in person recently, so that's really fun and exciting, and would like to do that some more. But how are you, Rich?
I'm doing good, buddy. It was great to see you. It was always too short of a time, but it was a moment to get the band together. So yes, as I am heading off to undisclosed locations, I was talking earlier about the fact that we do a lot of remote work. So the fact that I'm physically in a vehicle going to a site, as you can tell, I'm actually in a vehicle. I looked up, I'm like, gosh, I still have CDs in the car. So that tells you how often I'm in a vehicle, right? But no, it's good.
So you didn't do that just for us, huh?
Yeah, exactly. It's part of new set dressing. But no, I'm good. And again, didn't want to miss it. So yes, this is now, we are literally taking the show on the road.
I love it. I love it. Well, we have two guests that are joining us today. Both are friends in the industry and people who I admire and have spoken with over the course of many years. And they both are returning guests on our show. The first is Mike Krejci. He was last with us on episode 121, and he is with CTI. Welcome back, Mike.
Thanks, Steve. It was good seeing you in person last week as well as Rich. Glad to be on. I know my opinion on this topic has changed over time, so good to get out in the air and express my feelings.
Absolutely, and it was good seeing you. And another person who we passed each other, but we always get to say hi at trade shows and industry events. He's Tom Mclaughlin from Dobil Laboratories. He was last with us in episode 57, so that's quite some time ago, but welcome back, Tom. It's great to have you.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. I must have done something wrong that you guys blanketed me for 100 and some episodes, but I'm glad to be back. It's good to see you guys. Pittsburgh is booming, and we have lots of fun projects that we're on, and source code is something we've debated since the early or late 90s, early 2000s for me with regards to my tenure at Crestron and stuff, so let's kick this topic off. It's exciting.
Absolutely. And nothing that you did wrong. We just have to negotiate between our people and your people, but we're going to make that happen much more often. So thanks for being back with us.
Absolutely.
So as we talked about, there's been a lot of discussion around this topic. There are different views. Programmers have their views, especially independent programmers. Integrators have their views. There's also the talk about intellectual properties, the special sauce, all those things. And then many of the clients and technology managers now, they're becoming a lot more vocal in the industry and talking about how things should be handled with regard to source code from their perspective. And there, as we know, there really is no right or wrong. And a lot of this has to do with, what is defined and how we determine the ownership of source code. But source code is an important part because the systems that we do are longstanding and have to be updated and maintained, and that's a critical part of AV. So, Rich, I'll start it off with you. I know that as Tom said, this and Mike as well, the subject has kind of changed over time, and there was a lot of people who dug their feet in the ground early on, but I think that we're coming more toward a middle ground. Where do things stand from your perspective?
I think Tom nailed it, is that, there was an evolution. I want to say that, when we were all starting in the early 90s, mid 90s, whatever it was, you were doing a whole lot more one-offs. There just wasn't a whole lot of room necessarily for replication. Enterprise was definitely something that took a lot of massive work and coordination. You didn't have just a lot of the tools available to you. So I think early on there was the feeling that, it was the guy on the bucket sitting in the MDF that was crafting this special thing. And I think that, early on the control programming environment was like, it's mine. I made it. I keep it. And, there was a whole lot of problems. It really started becoming an issue as you got 5, 10, 15 years down the line and you're maintaining projects and you can't find what you need, or, the company went away, or all of these things started occurring that people were finding out well after the project was done. It's like, oh, we want to do a simple XYZ. Nothing was available to be able to get it done. And then it would be trying to track the person down, or, potentially making the investment twice. And so we were actually, kneecapping ourselves during the process. And I think over time, cooler heads prevailed that went, no, really, that's on you. If you have not educated your client enough, if you've not written your agreement to the point where you're saying, here is what we provide X. This is why we're providing it for this project. If it's a single use, if it's a multiple use, there are costs associated with it. And it's again, the running joke was like, look, I didn't create Microsoft Word. I created whatever the novella or the document was inside of it. So, what's proprietary when you're in partnership with a manufacturer who's providing the hardware, it was always that fine line. I think, honestly, when it got to the point where larger customers decided to go, hey, we've got a legal team, we ought to let them do something about this. I think that it was great in that it accelerated a maturation in terms of, here's what we do, here's the services we provide, and yes, here's a contract and an agreement for both sides to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Because without that, again, then we go into the next episode of scope creep, or, misdefined expectations, where all of a sudden, well, you said you would provide this and now we own it. Well, yes, but where did we, where are all the things we agreed on? So, I think that we're at the point now where the trend, fortunately, is more towards how do you define what the deliverable is? Of course, it's yours for the project. Now let's talk about all of the other factors beyond the project. And so I find it good. It was just, we've all had the horror stories, especially all of us who specialize in takeovers, of where things went wrong. And I think that now cooler heads are going, there is a better way. People are more receptive to it. Once you lay out the actual recipe of what you do, it also helps, for us, it helps vet a client better, because it does create a sense of expectation on both sides. And we know if they're going to be a good client just as much as hopefully they know we'll be a good programmer. So, I'm behind it. I've always been behind it, but, I'm glad to see that as a whole, we're moving towards a direction where, at the very least, we're better defining what we do.
I think that's a great take on it. And Mike, I wanted to ask you to elaborate a little bit, because when we talk about source code, we're not just talking about one thing. Source code actually has many parts. So take us into that journey a little bit, and also, what may be something that is easy to turn over, and what may be a little bit trickier in terms of being included in the source code, or is there a gray area there?
Yeah. So years ago, when you wrote the code, you compiled it, you sent it to a device, and it was there, right? It was running. You couldn't get it. There was no way to extract it. There was no way to find it. Now we're seeing control systems that are more configurable, right? I can go onto a device of a manufacturer and I can log in and I can pull the whole file. I can edit the user interface. I can edit the code. I can edit the audio parts, and I can send it back, and boom, it's done. There's not an actual compiled file that's locked and loaded, right? It's just live. So it's less of a thing now than I think before. Also, I think our systems overall, right, the 95% of systems are simpler than they used to be, right? There's nothing overly complicated we're doing in most of our conference rooms. We're sending a source up to a display. We're sending audio from here to there. We're turning on and off a display. We're controlling some page flips. There's nothing groundbreaking. The programmers are going to come at me with their pitchforks, but there's not anything groundbreaking we're doing in most of our systems. There might be, right? We could be doing something, more complicated here, where we spent hours working on an API to communicate with this device. That's something that, we spent the time on, or, somebody else spent the time on to do, that's not just specific for this project. We just came off the floor at Infocom, and, there was examples of AI into control systems, a couple different places on the floor. That's some work that somebody did that's, pretty darn proprietary right now. If we figured out a module to do something with AI and spent the research and development time on it, that's something we're doing for all of our customers and not necessarily one. That's something, that we can lock and secure. But otherwise, it's just open anymore. It's not as complicated as it seems, I think, right?
I'll jump on to Mike's comments and just say the specialty stuff. So making the AV system work as a whole, can I get a source? Can I get the display to turn on? Can I get a meeting to happen? And then the special sauce stuff is some special use case that particular customer needs, that you might have written some very customized thing to pull off some feature set that they need. To me, I do like what Mike says, is the majority of the systems, as long as the customer, honestly, we're all in business to stay in business. Let's make sure that our customers' needs are met. The proprietary stuff that you might have done and spent a lot of labor and R&D time towards, there needs to be some form of protection, but turning on the system, selecting a source, adjusting the volume, turning on and off the lights and some shades or something like that, there's nothing proprietary about that on any whatever platform you choose to use. So I think for sure that certainly would never be proprietary, should not be protected, and anybody should be able to pull that right out, make an adjustment, switch the inputs around, relabel some stuff. That should be absolutely anybody's ability to do.
Yeah, I think that's important to note. And so, Tom, following up on that, how do you go about educating the client? Is this something that we need to be a little bit more careful about, or be more forthcoming to be able to spell this out and make sure that they understand, that this is what you get, and these other things you might not, or maybe they don't even know what source code is.
We do a fair job of educating our customers that are not repeat customers or new acquisition, right? A lot of our higher education customers have certification and internal teams that are designing and installing audiovisual systems that sometimes we program, sometimes they program, sometimes we take their platform. They're perfectly capable of doing their own code, but maybe we get some high visibility space or something like that, right? So we've worked that all out with those customers. It's the customers that don't know any better at all. And we tell our sales force, when we do the proposal, we give them a couple, when we bid on a project and estimate labor, especially programming labor, we show them a couple, this is a typical of that type of system, classroom, meeting room, knock, whatever. And they see a picture of that, and they see what we are showing as what would be standard, your basic AV functionality, nothing outside the box. They get that as part of when we complete the job, and they sort of like they get their as-built drawings, they get a package, Usually it's just a file we upload to a repository for them. And they have all their uncompiled code. They also have all their a spreadsheet with all their IP and passwords to all their device peripherals, so that their IT people can maintain that, as well as the latest or last modified DSP configuration. Because obviously anybody could come and adjust a volume, and that's a new file all of a sudden, right? So we give that to them as to get your system back if something catastrophic would happen. The higher education customers are a little bit of a challenge, because depending on the higher education customer, they may have 100 classrooms and their team is just trying to take one source code and load that into 100 classrooms. And you're like, well, wait a second. We wrote that code, and I know if I was an independent programming house, I would want to license that per classroom. And we just turn that around on them and educate them that there is a programmatic change to each of those, because maybe the labeling, maybe the setup, maybe the testing, the configuration of that actual room differs, even though the source code is essentially a copy and paste of the next room. And just show them that there is a value to have us maintaining that as separate file structures, or at least a separate config file that we maintain and we own as part of our full solution. But you do have to educate them to all those nuances. And it used to be the big bad programming aspect of it, but they now see that there's, especially with like deploying Zoom rooms and deploying Teams rooms, that they know, and their IT people are advocating that, no, that's an actual time suck of labor that takes to set all that up. And it's absolutely unique, even though if they're commissioning it and they're basically commissioning the same image across 100 rooms, that each one has its own little nuance and each little setup that you do need to differentiate for each space. So we try to do that as our best way to explaining that to our folks.
I'll chime in here to what Tom said. It really comes down to a customer service discussion, right?
Right.
If the customer is happy with us, yeah, we'll give you the code, but what are you going to do? You want to call us anyway. We're here, right? It's part of our agreement with you is we're going to help you guys through any of those challenges, through those changes. We are, I don't want to say better at it, but we are more trained up to create the best experience. So if you need a change, reach out to us. We will help you. Sure, we'll give you the file. You can pull it from the device, whatever you need to, but reach out to us. We're a partner in this.
Right.
The same thing is they ask us, for the, out of nowhere, they call us and go, hey, we want the code. Okay, why do you want the code? What are you trying to do? Is it something we did, that you want to leave us? Okay, is there something we can do to fix it? Or is it already over, right? And they're going to go over and find the next integrator. They're going to go do something else. Okay, then what lessons can we learn as a company as to why they are no longer wanting to work with us, right? Yeah. And so I think the programming becomes it really is a customer service conversation, and how can we best serve our customers? Yeah, if you want it, well, here it is, but why? What can we do next? How can we make this better?
Yeah, Mike, I'll chime into that. It's really funny. Our design and engineering department is literally the lightning rod to our sales team that says, somebody asked for code, somebody's screwing up somewhere. That's literally how that conversation goes. In my years at Dobil, it's hilarious because one of two things happens. That call happens because our sales team didn't keep that relationship, or something happened out of our control. Right. And we're getting solicited for, we'll have the code. And then we say, you already have the code, but we'll give you the code as an official handoff. That's literally how that conversation goes. Or 10 years later, I go to a job site or somebody says, we're still using that system, and you're shocked that they're still using a 10 to 15-year-old system that looks ridiculous, because you're like, wow, look at the work we did back 15 years ago. And, it's one of those two jokes happen. And it's literally the sales lightning rod of, oh my God, they're asking for the code. Usually that means something bad happened with our relationship with the customer.
I would agree with you there. We have the same exact thing in our company. It's same exact. And I think it's important, to kind of take that approach that, we all are working on repeat business and relationships and trust. And so, usually there should be no problem here. The code is yours and we want you to have it. But when they ask for it, it's usually a trigger as to something came up. But many times it's not as bad as we think, but I agree that, Mike, I wanted to kind of pull on that a little bit and talk about when you do turn over the code, does the client understand what the responsibility of having the code is? And I say this in a very respectful way, is that many of the members of our industry are now on the client side, and they have the ability to do things on their own. But when turning over code, once it gets modified, it could potentially impact warranties and support agreements and so forth. So what does that look like?
When you can download, the software, it's not all as gatekept as it was, 10, 15, 20 years ago. They can go grab the software to pull the code to modify the code and do it. There's definitely a line, okay, you guys made all these changes and it stopped working when you made these changes. Our agreement's no longer good as of that point in time. We can go back to where we were. We had a working code that we signed off on, you signed off on. We can go back to that point and all be happy again. Then we can go and fix whatever change you want, make that adjustment, do that thing. I'm not seeing that as often as I would think, though. It's not really, a lot of times it's the customer just wants a copy of it. Their boss said, hey, we need a copy of the code. And we give them a link to it and to a repository, and here it is. And, 6 months back, we come and make a change and they haven't touched it. They haven't done anything to it. They just wanted the ability to say, yep, we have it here. It's in our library. We see it a lot on, the consultant-led projects, the bid projects, where, the document's still written from 20 years ago and it says, need to provide a manual for every piece of equipment in the space. That 50-page, the binder of manuals that's 3 feet tall of every display and mount and rack in the system, because that's what you're supposed to provide. And then you provide the CD in the back, after you find a CD burner somewhere to burn it, you're supposed to provide this document. Does anyone actually use it? Probably not. It sits on a shelf and collects dust. And
I really feel that when giving code to customers, it goes back to what I said earlier. They don't even realize they have the code or what that means to them, almost on all fronts. So we do that depending on the business situation, like if it's through a consultant or whatever. We obviously have the mandate to send them that, but we just keep an online repository that they can download at any point down the road. And a sidebar to what Mike's saying, the other end of the spectrum is we actually, on some levels, have a laptop for our. So we have an entertainment side of things that we're doing for some of the entertainment venues. And we have a laptop that has their working code on it because they're mission critical. And if there's maybe the device like an encoder or decoder that goes down and they want some big, sporting event that they don't want to be down for, they literally will have us rewrite a patch for that night and then go back and fix that. So we grab snapshots of what we have, but we literally leave everything runtime there for perpetuity. We keep copies of it, but we know in keeping copies, we probably don't have the latest iteration of what's actually in that big, gigantic system that you want to make sure that they don't have a down event. They don't have a Super Bowl event or something like that where they turn off 2,000 customers. So it's a different, every application is a different scenario on how we handle that to the customer.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out too, as you've said several times, that source code is only one component of the software or the files that make a system work. And you've alluded to keeping spreadsheet of IP addresses, having the DSP file, understanding what your settings are. The thing that both of you have mentioned several times is the concept of a repository. Tom, can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I was going to say, back in the day, we used to put stuff on a disk, just like you guys said, and it used to go in a folder, and everybody thought that they were safe. But these things now are kind of living and breathing. Yeah.
So we are attempting to do a better job at service as a company. I'll say transparently that it's a work in progress, but we have decided to. For any of our systems, as we close out a project, all of our closeout documents go to a SharePoint that our internal service team can take. So once the project is done, they have the working source code. More important to them is actually the DSP code, because they're not going to be making changes to programming, but they may need to look in and see what's going on the settings of the audio system. And we just leave that as a SharePoint, and then when we need to, just give the customer a shared link that we can make perishable or logged in by certain folks, and then our internal team all have a login, and depending on who's on call for the service to respond for different systems, can grab a hold of that from our service thing. And that whole custody is its own internal Dobil problem, because once the project manager thinks he's done and the project is closed out, the service people change. There might be minor changes to the system. So the programmer who wrote the code originally might not be the guy who makes the minor revision if they did a minor change for a service call a couple years down the road. So there's that whole element. So we had to put in it's basically just a process the way we do our SharePoint internally, where the person just creates a rev onto the service side of things. So they can identify that there's been changes to the original source code. It creates its own internal thing, because two separate levels of, hey, we deployed the system and we tested it out day one, but who knows, year three, it might be a different system altogether. They might have changed displays or changed sources or something like that. And that's maintained in our service side of things at this point.
Which really brings up a good point about managing the source code, which is a key component, and Mike kind of said that earlier too. You can have it, but do you know what to do with it, and do you know how to maintain it?
Yes.
Mike, do you want to talk a little bit more about that from your perspective?
Yeah, so we're using a Git-based repository, right, for our code. So if one, we're no longer in the version 2 final, version 2 really final, yes, version 2 end of the day, right? Yes. We're now doing commits and pushes and able to make a commit message. Change this decoder from this to this. Okay, now we know, we have tracking. We see who did it, when they did it, why they did it. We're transitioning into the traditional programming, world of Git and version control, source control, that AV hasn't, we had our own little mishmash of it before, and trying to play like the big boys do. And, it's been a rocky process, and, we could go on to a whole, series of episodes about version control and source control, if we wanted to, but it gives you that history. It gives you, and then it's out there in the cloud, right? It's not sitting on, my computer or a server here. It's sitting out in the cloud, and I can give a client access. Here's your access to your code. They make a change, they can push it back up, right? And we can see, oh, look, they made a commit here at this point. We see that. We can see when our service techs did, when our programmers did, anyone who goes out there, and we're seeing that history. It becomes more than just a file or a directory. It's a history, and it creates real good opportunities to help, facilitate with the customer on that relationship and that stickiness when it comes to the program.
I think all the things that you guys just said is so critical, and it also should be a confidence builder for those who are looking to receive the source code, understanding that there's a responsibility, but understanding the fact that many companies went to great lengths to be able to keep this managed for you, and having a company that does this in a planned way is really important, and being able to look at a way of sharing that and having access to it, as you mentioned, I think is probably a great compromise for how to transfer and manage making sure that they know that the source code is available. Rich, I know you've been driving, and we've kind of lost you a little bit off course, but as we wrap up, I want to bring you into the conversation. We talked about a lot of things that are really educational and also important, as far as the evolution of how source code has come from we lost Rich. we will get him back a little later on. But as we wrap up, are there any tips that we want to share in terms of understanding, what this source code situation is, and it seems like we've gotten to a point right now where this should be less of a sticking point. Mike, is there anything else you wanted to add to the conversation?
No, I think we can summarize it by be good to your customer, right? If you take care of your customer, then it doesn't matter as much on who owns the code, right? It's theirs, it's ours. We're working in collaboration with each other. Are you using a third party and then an integrator and then the customer? Okay, you're all working towards the same goal for the customer to have a great experience in a great room, so in a great system. So do right and play nice, and we're all going to be happy, I think, at the end. I don't think it gets more complicated than that.
That's a great summary. Tom, is there anything you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean, the debate I have is every time a customer or a potential customer asks us to take somebody else's code over, we have to do a risk analysis of, is that truly the latest code in there? And when they say they do not have access to the code, our first stance is to say to them, look, it's not a good value for Dobil to reprogram this situation for you from scratch, unless it's a really basic system. And even that, they're paying for something that they've already paid for. And we articulate that to them, that the best thing for you to do is hold the person's, the integrator or the programmer that originally did this, to either come and fix this problem or update this situation, or make sure you're in good standing with them that they're willing to send you the source code. Even when we get that package from our customers, we still put in extra hours of our estimate to cover ourselves, because we know even in our practice, what I would give you for one of my jobs might or might not be the final rev. It would certainly get you close, but it may have some minor thing that somebody's going to have to go through that system and make sure it's good to go. And that's a labor cost that should not, and like Mike said, be fair to your customer. Be good to your customer. That's the best thing you can do. Is the better Dobil is at maintaining our code, the more likely that somebody's not going to be saying that about a Dobil deployment when I hand them that code over. And we've been in this industry long enough to know that if I'm giving code to somebody and they're going a different direction, it's out of our control. Just be professional about it. Hand it over and be as helpful as you can. It's a small industry, so we all know each other. Heck, you might see my name on something and I see your name on something we're looking at. I'll literally reach out to the programmer if I know him and say, look, I got this. What's your take? And just to make sure that it's as seamless as possible, and make sure that everybody's, as far as customers facing, their needs are met. So that's my take.
I like that a whole lot. And I totally agree with you in terms of taking over somebody's code and not really knowing, and there is a risk involved, but there also is something about being fair and knowing that the client is going to get what they need. So
right.
It's been there, and I'm sure many of our audience members can relate, and they're probably shaking their head right now.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great way for us to wrap this up. I really think that this was a great conversation. I really appreciate all the insight that you guys have provided, and I think that this has been very educational. Mike Krejci from CTI, how can people get in touch with you? How can people learn more about CTI and keep up with what you're doing?
So LinkedIn, the best place to find me. It's the Mike Krejci, just as it sounds. For CTI, you can find us at cti.com. And just as a disclaimer, AVNation is a subsidiary of CTI, so you can also find us at avnation.tv.
Wonderful. And Tom Mclaughlin from Dobil Laboratories, thanks for being with us. How can people get in touch with you? How can people learn more about Dobil? And how can we get you on the next show sometime sooner than 100 episodes?
Yeah, just reach out. Again, I appreciate sharing time, as I always do with you guys. I really like our industry. I think we're all blessed that we have a lot of upstanding, fantastic people in our industry. And it's good just to advocate for more people being interested in making a career here, because it's a great place to be. I'm at Dobil.com. I'm my email address is tom@dobil.com, because I'm probably the fourth employee that had an email address at Dobil. And I'm on LinkedIn and all the other social media sites doing crazy things. So reach out. And Dobil Laboratories is based out of Pittsburgh. Dobil.com. We're having a ball over here.
Absolutely. Thanks for being with us. Rich, I think we got you back. I know that you may not have heard many of the things in today's conversation because of your travels, but we had some great content and really insightful expertise. If there's anything you wanted to add or share, but how could people get in touch with you, learn more about Fregosa Design, and keep up with what you're doing and keep you on the road?
Yeah, again, that like Tim says, the best show is the one that Uncle Richie doesn't talk, right? So, yeah, if you want to find out more about Fregosa Design, you can find us on the webpage, fregosadesign.com. You can find me on the socials at rfregosa. Also, probably the best place, as I always say, that you can find us is on AVNation.tv and our suite of shows serving all of the verticals, including State of Control. Actually, I think I did a 3 for 3. I think I did Resi, AV Week, and then State of Control over a past week and a half period. So please, if you can find me, that's the best place to find me, I hope, and always support our sponsors.
Nice. Thanks for being with us, and I know it'll be a lot easier for you next time we speak, and we'll certainly have more airtime. For me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. My company, Control Concepts, we provide some of the foundational building blocks for integrating products and programs, as well as adding some additional functionality and features. And those could be found at controlconcepts.net. And as we all alluded, we got the chance to see each other at Infocom. You can find the coverage of Infocom at avnation.tv. So check that out. And as Rich said, be kind to the sponsors that have supported this show and many of the others on the platform. And also, while you're there, check out some of the other shows in the AVNation suite. There is EdTech, which talks about the education sector of the AV industry. There's a Resi Week, which is more residential, AV Week, which is the flagship show. There's one on careers. There's one about women in AV. All great stuff, and I listen to many of them, so please check them out as well. Highly recommend that. And this show, as well as the others, are found both on the video and audio versions. So you can find the video version on YouTube and the audio version on your favorite podcast platform. And with that, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. This has been A State of Control,
the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.